Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses. This is a fascinating discussion. Mr. McGowan, I'd like to start with you. Would it be fair to say that the transition that we've been talking about for so long, that it's actually already happening?
Without a doubt. And if you took a look at the fossil fuel industry in Alberta as a whole, we've already seen the phase out of coal-fired power, uh, which is something that I was intimately involved in as president of the Federation of Labor. I was also co-chair of something called the Coal Transition Coalition, which was a coalition of unions representing people who worked in the coal-fired power sector, both the plants and the coal mines. And we negotiated the first together. We negotiated the first sector-wide just transition package for workers who lost their jobs as a result of that change. So that was thousands of jobs already lost. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the number of people working in Alberta's oil and gas sector has already dropped from a peak of about 182,000 directly employed in 2013 to about we lost about 42,000 jobs since then. So it's happening
Yeah.
already as a result of the move away from fossil fuels, the reluctance for big investors to put money into it, and then also there's the question of automation.
Right, right. And automation, I think, is a big issue because we've seen 17% loss up to 2019. We're expecting more losses. And as companies retool, we're looking to automation. I guess what I want to bring this to focus, I mean, I've lived unjust transitions. I was in one of the last shifts underground at Elliott Lake before we lost 4,000 uranium jobs. Um, and I've never seen a good transition. I've said it's U-Hauls leaving in the middle of the night. It's economic disaster usually. What I find really flummoxing about the situation in the West is we have such an opportunity to make the investments now to make change. I'm looking at the report from last December from Calgary Economic Development in Global Edmonton that says there's a $61 billion opportunity for Alberta and 171,000 clean tech jobs. But that will necessitate major changes. First of all, what the province is actually investing in, a major increase. But what would it mean at the federal level so that instead of having the usual heartbreak stories of people having to leave and shut down, that we're actually starting this transition now? I don't see that federal presence in a big enough way. What do we need to do to make this happen?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to do is make a commitment to the concept of just transition, which Ms. Carter has already alluded to. And when people talk about just transition, I think some people have different ideas of what it actually is. Some people talk about just transition as adjustment policies for workers who lose their jobs in the affected industries. Some other people talk about just transition in terms of future economic transformation. And I just want to make it clear from our perspective in the Alberta labor movement, when we talk about just transition, we're talking about both of those things.
Right, right.
They're related. So, in the near term, we need policies for workers who are facing the loss of their jobs. That means, training for younger workers, pension bridging for older workers, relocation allowances. These are the kind of things that we actually negotiated with the previous Alberta government as part of the just transition package for affected workers in the coal-fired power industry. So there are lessons to be learned there. But then there's the bigger question of economic transformation that can generate economic opportunity for people who are displaced, but also for people who are not even in the industry, just grow the economy. And for that latter, part of just transition, I'll be blunt. We need to put money on the table. And in my initial remarks, I talked about, like if our governments at the provincial and federal level are serious about dealing with energy transformation and providing just transition for workers and regions, we have to think big in the order of the Marshall Plan, the mobilization for World War II, the Apollo moonshots. That means governments have to put a lot of money on the table. What I'm concerned about is that money will be put on the table. but it might be for the wrong things.
Right.
So the oil industry, for example, has asked for $75 billion from the federal government for carbon capture and sequestration. I think we should model that and see where would the money be better spent on helping sequester carbon
Yeah.
or to actually build a transition towards a greener economy. I think Canadians deserve to know that before our governments start signing checks.
I think that's really, really important. And I want to say that from our perspective, the New Democratic Party, we don't get to a clean energy future without Alberta.
Yeah.
We have the potential, we have the skill, but it is going to take a national vision. And I mean, we hear about carbon capture and how many billions that we're going to keep subsidizing when we actually may be able to shift that money into much better use with putting more people to work. So, how important is it to have the workers at the table um, in this discussion?
Yeah, you can't have a just transition without workers. And I would suggest a dedicated new transfer from the federal government to provinces that are energy provinces, like mostly Alberta, but also Saskatchewan and Newfoundland. We're the ones who are going to make the biggest sacrifices in the transition to a greener economy, and the federal government and other Canadians have to support us through that transition. And that's why, like I'm talking, like I have recommended a dedicated just transition transfer in addition to other transfers from the federal government to affected provinces.
So I know my time's up, but can you send us notes on anything you have on how you guys see the just transition so we can look at it in our study?
Yeah,